Yeah, so yeah, like the amount of times I've seen discussions about transphobia or specifically come up, and there's some very, very wise, I'm being incredibly sarcastic, person in the comments who's like, can't you just wait until we have independence first? Shouldn't independence be the focus? I'm like,
Well, what's the point of that, considering...
we can worry about two things.
Yeah.
We can do two political things at once.
And I'll be honest here about this, and if it's okay, like, I'm not trying to hijack the whole, because how I see it is this. When you look at, like, racial issues and trans issues, how I see it is basically it's both of the same thing. The language that is being used is absolutely abhorrent, and it's no different. It's just like me saying, it's just like, oh, if someone says, if we take a look at America, where we saw a disproportionate of individuals from the African American community being arrested, and basically being mistreated for violent crimes, for crimes that, well, sorry, not violent crimes, crimes that are so minor that if that person was of a Caucasian race, it will, they would be not treated that horribly. And that is just like saying, oh, I have no problems with the African American community, but I'm seeing like quite a lot of this going on, so I'm not really too sure if I want to share my space. And I'm just going like, you gotta be joking me, right?
Yeah, like we had Lady Phil on earlier talking about intersectionality. Sorry, my mind's a bit frazzled. I think it's just
No,
hit that
but yeah, we had
£4,000.
we had Lady Phil on a wee bit earlier, and it was talking about how like these issues aren't actually as separate as a lot of people would maybe like to think. In a way that like the intersectionality between obviously fighting things like racism and fighting for fighting whether it's homophobic, biphobic or transphobic kind of rhetoric, it all kind of comes from the same place. So it's actually really odd when someone wouldn't want to kind of share that intersectionality, if you get me.
Yeah, no, it's just yeah, and I mean, I will say this, like, I had to put in a police report after my name was released out onto Wings over Scotland, because I'm in an unstable job at the moment, and unfortunately, they can't actually pursue anything because, unfortunately, the mysterious blogger has actually just has not crossed that path, which is a sad case of our legal system. And but I was constantly worried on getting doxxed at work and losing my job or anything, just because some people are saying that, oh no, she is going, if you, she is against women's rights, which I'm just like kind of going, are you really serious? So so yeah, I know we got into heavy territory right here.
No,
it's quite alright. It needs to be discussed, which is one of the reasons we have this stream, is because we have a platform, and we hope we can get kind of messages out.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and it's hurtful because, like, even though I joined the independence, well, I officially joined the SNP in 2019, but I never in my life thought that there were certain people who I used to trust hold these views. And if anything, every time when these views is being mentioned, either on Twitter or anything else or whatsoever, it makes me feel, it reminds me of the time whenever I was, so when did I take my GCSEs? Oh my goodness. About 2004, and I think I was about 11-ish or so. I was in a junior high school, and I was getting bullied. Now, I was told that told by my parents, if you're getting bullied, then go and talk to the teacher. But when I did report it, the headmistress took me into her office. Now, And she basically said, like, so I interviewed, so basically I just talked to these people, but, you know, they were saying that you were saying all these things, saying that you like girls. Why is that? So it's just, and I just basically felt so, you know, so freaking unequal and everything else whatsoever. That was like early 2000s. And then I also remembered from that time that I was kicked out of a female changing room, and I'm cisgendered. I identify myself as female from birth because basically people say, and the girl said to me, and the PE teacher didn't do anything to step in, that you need to go out because you're looking at my legs. And I just like, I haven't got changed yet. And so it doesn't matter, you need to go out. So I went out.
Mhm.
And so it is the same similarity I am seeing. And I don't understand why people could not see that pattern. So
Yeah.
it's absolutely disgraceful and everything else. Oh, and I was also told you can never be a doctor because you will feel up my legs and you will actually hurt kids. So yeah, tell that to an 11, 12, or 13-year-old. I think I was at that time. So yeah, that was my experience.
That's horrid.
and-
Yeah.
I mean, that, and unfortunately, that it doesn't sound too uncommon. We had Scott from the Equality Network on a wee bit earlier that was actually kind of talking about, you know, it is those same arguments that, I mean, obviously, you know, you've faced a lot more recently, but it's like the same arguments being used against, you know, whether it's same arguments used against trans people. That's what's historically been used against, you know, gay and lesbian people and bisexual
Yeah.
people as well. So.
As someone who came out as non-binary recently, well, recently, like 4 or 5 years ago, recently in the cosmic sense of things,
We don't count last year.
it's so frustrating because it's so obvious that it's just repackaged homophobic rhetoric against trans people. And what's kind of something else that's annoying is this whole divide and conquer of the community appeal, apparently. Sorry, you're being chased by a giant worm.
Chased by a freaking maggot. Oh no, I remember this one.
They're the worst.
Hydrate, by the way.
Yeah, I'll
yeah.
hydrate when I'm dead.
It's so much.
It looks like you want to kiss. Or am I not allowed to? No, they want to kiss.
So, I suppose just a wee aside, I didn't want to interrupt it while I was fighting the previous boss. The boss that I just fought, the one where I was kind of like pogoing up and down on its head, according to this game, it is canonically a MILF. So,
I remember that.
in the worst possible way, this is Fluke Marm, and all of these things I'm fighting are her offspring.
All right, now I have to transition into a serious topic about transplantation. Thank you.
Sorry. Before we go into the serious topic, can I just that I don't know if you will meet these enemies later on, but there is like a blob in which it goes, okay, right, it's normal, it just slivers along, but then when you're close to it, it just goes with hands popping out, and it looks like it's just like, look, it comes chasing after you. I don't know if you met that yet.
We might have. It sounds like something that might be in Deep Nest, which is one of the areas of the game. I feel like I'm not doing very much narration to the game. We're having such interesting chats that like I'm perfectly happy with the game, and my gameplay is kind of faded into the background. More than
It is
happy.
kind of funny though to cut between, you know, us all having these really serious conversations, and then a maggot is just running along the corridor while you're sitting there going fuck very quietly.
I'm trying not to interrupt
Really-
really good conversation. That's why.
That was the
But yeah.
beauty of Hollow Knight. I was actually really surprised that you're saying, I'm going to play Hollow Knight, and it's like, whilst we're having a serious conversation, right?
Yeah. I think it's a good diffuser. But Now to hop back to the serious thing. Am I right in saying you're the lesbian campaign coordinator for Alpha?
I am the lesbian campaign coordinator. Officially, I am the lesbian campaign coordinator, but apparently now we're drifting over to lesbian officer, which is probably much more easier to say. So.
Okay, because often, but from certain people, certain groups,
Yeah.
the trans what is referred to as the trans issue, which is a terminology I hate, is presented as, you know, trans people stealing lesbians or
Yeah,
stuff
that's
like
a
that.
yeah. Can I just? Am I allowed to? I want to swear, but I really don't want to. I know the rules.
Oh, you're allowed to. You're
No,
allowed to
you're
swear.
allowed-
We're
you're
not-
allowed to
We're
swear.
trying not to mention certain people by name, just for.
It's bullshit.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
It is.
It's
absolutely
absolute
allowed.
bullshit. Because I'm gonna
Sorry,
be
sorry.
honest.
Just before we get, you've just heard me whisper "fuck, fuck, fuck" into the mic as I ran away from a giant maggot. You can swear.
No, but it's I'm just trying to be. Yeah. Sorry. Let me get comfortable. Oh.
It's quite alright. My pizza's gonna be here soon, by the way.
Oh, lucky.
Yeah. No.
I remember to order food at some point. It's getting late.
Already in motion.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I didn't put it up to a
Serious?
poll though, because I knew that someone would be like, just like pizza with like no tomato sauce, just pure anchovies for like, and I'll donate £600, and like an idiot I would do it. So
I would have done that too, actually.
If someone does do that, I'm just like.
Anyway, sorry. Yeah, Sarah.
serious conversation.
The trans versus lesbians, quote unquote.
I don't understand where that came from. I'm going to be honest here, and I'm a lesbian, right? Now, I'm not going to mention any names on this, which is because I don't want to get because whatsoever.
Good shit.
But how I see it is this, right? And you know, it's just I didn't realize this was such a big issue until I actually got involved a bit more in Scottish politics, because see, when I was involved in LGBTQ plus community, I was interacting with people from non-binary communities. I was learning a bit more about trans issues. I'm still learning, so I know I will make mistakes about it. Teddy Hope did actually correct me on something, which I take that on board and everything else. And when we were campaigning for same-sex marriage at Stormont, which has been rejected so many times because the DUP has misused, and I would say misused, the petition of concern, because obviously that's not what's supposed to be used for in the first place. I don't see that division. You got like a lot of feminists that basically were coming out in support for trans rights and supporting our trans community. But it's only whenever I came over to the mainland, I just basically just went, why is this such a big issue? What the hell is going on? And apparently it's because of these instant reports of what is of what has happened. And like I said before, it's the same analogy. And how I say this, just like, well, that's just like you saying to me that you don't trust Asian people, and there is a rise of xenophobia, of, you know, hate against Asians. Maybe more so in America, but there is reports of it in the UK as well, across the four nations, because
100%.
yeah, and that's just like you saying to me, yeah, I blame you for the coronavirus. I blame you and whatever for the coronavirus. You should be rounded up and you should be kept separate. I don't want to share my facilities with you because you might pass it on. That's
My
no.
pizza's here, sorry.
Jesus,
Yeah.
Sky. But no, I completely, I completely agree. And I think definitely some of the rhetoric that was obviously, let's just say, unfortunately encouraged by the former president of the United States. But
Yeah.
like, especially in regards to, you know, I think the sort of classic virus nickname that was given.
The China virus. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was, you know, all this sort of stuff's like just straight up abhorrent. And I have just realised something about this game. I am an idiot. I'm an idiot child who is an idiot.
Why?
Also, if we can, I think Casey is ready to hop back in, as is our next speaker as well.
Oh, fantastic.
Sarah, you're welcome to stay, obviously. As long as you want.
Oh.
I got my pizza.
Okay, why you're an idiot?
Sorry,
why
I'm an
you-
idiot because I forgot one vital thing that I'm actually supposed to do in the game, and I was like, oh, where is it? And I've been kind of fannying around for the better part of 20 minutes going, what have I forgotten? I've realised that the one thing was the thing I'm going to just now, so yeah, sorry.
Is it a trinket or is it
It's a pale ore, it's the thing to upgrade my nail, so my weapon is at its strongest, and I need to speak to this moth.
Hello. Welcome back. Welcome back, Casey. And hello, Blair. Would you
Hello.
like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
Yes.
we can.
Thank you. I am a Twitch newbie. Hello, I'm Blair Anderson. Pronouns are he and him. 22, I'm in Glasgow. I wear a few different hats, so I mostly do green stuff. So I'm co-convener of the Glasgow and West of Scotland Young Greens. I am running to be a councillor. There's a by-election coming up in a couple of weeks, so running to be a Green councillor in Glasgow, running for the Scottish Parliament in May. And aside from that, in terms of LGBTQ stuff, I also do like estrangement advocacy, which is super vague, but we'll get into that in more detail, I assume.
Yes. No, that's fantastic to have you on, Blair. Thanks very much for joining us and taking the time. I suppose we'll start with a smoother question to kind of break you in. Do you play much video games yourself, or are you more of a film and a TV show person?
I am absolutely not a gamer. The only game I play is Animal Crossing.
That counts.
I don't even know that well. Does that count?
Oh,
That-
100%.
I do watch my boyfriend play Fallout 4 and Skyrim.
Ah, cool.
So that's sort of like IRL streaming.
Yeah, yeah. You have to put up with the commentary.
Yeah,
But no, that's brilliant.
yeah.
Cool. So that's how you enjoying Animal Crossing.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, this is an incredibly green thing to say. I felt really bad that you have to like do landscaping and like plant paths and like dig up the weeds and stuff, because I was like, oh, I just want to like sort of let it go wild, like rewilding. So I felt bad about it. But I've now gotten into like full-on landscape gardener.
Ah, good stuff. Cool. Sky, do you want to kick off?
I'm eating pizza, I'm sorry.
Oh, right, okay. Gee. So, Blair, I think it'll be a really interesting place to kind of take the discussion to. But you obviously do quite a lot of work with, estranged young people. And I suppose I'm kind of curious in, like, how did you get into that in the first place, and what does the work involve?
Yeah, I'll try and not make it too depressing. It can be pretty depressing, but towards the end of estrangement stories, it's often very uplifting. So yeah, family estrangement is basically family breakdown. Sort of for not just falling out, but having your relationship entirely break down, especially with family and like key members of family and stuff. So I'm estranged myself. I'm gay. When I came out, when I was like 14, 15, the reaction from my family was super negative. My family is crazy religious missionary types. So I came out to them and it didn't go really well, so I just pretended to be straight for a little bit. Until I got to university. So moved to university when I was 18. And from then, sort of the independence and the freedom meant I could sort of cut off ties bit by bit with family. And then eventually I was able to break off ties completely, which was good. But the problem then is that there's very little support in place for young people who don't have families, like especially in education. Estrangement particularly affects students, but it's a challenge for like anyone who faces it, especially young people and especially students. Because lots of systems, especially student funding systems, are based on the assumption that you'll have a family who will help you out. So when you don't have a family to help you out and you don't have any other support, it can be like super difficult. So that's how I got into it personally. I had to drop out of university because after my relationship, the family broke down. I was having money issues, I was having mental health issues, I was having job issues, all that sort of stuff that normally people would sort of rely on their family to help them out with, but there was just no support. So I had to drop out, but in my year out, I spent the year sort of campaigning. A lot of issues with the Scottish Government and with SAS, like they shouldn't funding people. And ended up campaigning, managed to get them to change their tune, and managed to help secure proper support for estranged students, which is good. Yeah, and aside from that, I try and do like advocacy stuff, so, like talking about estrangement more, because no one really talks about it. Offering like practical advice to people who find me on Twitter and don't really know how to navigate the systems and stuff.
Sorry about this. I'll be coming back on tomorrow. It's just I actually need to ring 111 because I'm not feeling well.
No, that's no problem at all, Sarah.
Okay, Sarah.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you so much. Bye.
We'll see you later on. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Sky, you're a little bit quiet, is all I'm hearing.
Sorry, I'm leaning away from the mic.
Okay.
That was just a quick recap. That was Sarah Chung, who is available on Twitter, I believe.
Yep.
At StayCurious18, and is the lesbian campaign coordinator for the LGBT group Out for Indie.
Yeah. It's interesting, just the sort of conversation, Blair, in regards to, you say that, you know, estrangement isn't really talked about as much as it probably should be, and I think, is there a kind of a solid line, I suppose, on, you know, what is regarded as estrangement? Because I think, you know, there's probably quite a lot of kind of micro breakdowns of the family, but does that, I don't want to say does that count, but how's it classed entirely?
Yeah, so definitions are a particularly tricky issue. Yeah, what you're saying about it's not talked enough, like how many people does it affect? I think the research is like 1 in 5 people are part of an estranged family. Like there is someone in the family that's estranged from them, or they themselves are estranged, or you know, someone in their extended family. Like it affects 1 in 5 people, but it's not talked about like effectively ever.
I was going to say for 1 in 5 people, that seems extremely high for it to, you know, not much to be said on it, you know?
Yeah, like I'm trying to find the stats. There's a really good LGBT Youth Scotland paper into this. It obviously disproportionately affects LGBTQ people because with like family rejection and stuff, and being queer being a sort of confounding factor when it comes to, you know, being care experienced or difficulty accessing healthcare and social care and all that. It's about 5%. Let me try and find this paper because it is really good. I meant to find it out before. But it hugely disproportionately impacts queer young people.
The figure that's always it's not obviously direct, or it's partially linked to estrangement, I think, unless I have the definition of estrangement wrong. That the thing that has always stuck with me is the Stonewall report about trans homelessness.
It's a hugely housing issue.
Trans people have been or currently are homeless. At least as of 2017. I like to think that number might have decreased, but I slightly worry it hasn't.
Yeah, I found the paper. LGBT Youth Scot, like, there's also very little research into estrangement. Like, it's not talked about a lot. It's not like a category that's really recognised anywhere, but it affects lots of people. So the stats are, LGBT Youth Scotland asked about queer young people leaving home. You know, most people leave home in like positive circumstances. They move out, or they get a job, or they move away for uni. The stats for LGBTQ people overall, 15% of LGBTQ young people in this survey felt forced out or left under negative circumstances, and that goes up to 22% in trans people. Like, 1 in 5 trans people is being kicked out of the home or leaving because they don't feel welcome anymore. And more often than not, there's not like a sort of stable place for them to go afterwards.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's kind of horrifying figures, and we've got one question from the stream talking about like, and I'm not sure if it's more you know, you doing estrangement advocacy yourself, but do you know of any like groups that offer like sort of counselling type support?
So LGBT, I personally got counselling from LGBT Scotland. The youth groups are really good. No, the youth groups. There are youth groups. The sort of regional groups are really good. So they offered that. In terms of, like, I don't. So I see a question in the chat. Your organisation, there's not really an organisation. It's just sort of me tweeting. I do try and offer like counselling and advice and stuff. Like my pinned Twitter messages. You know, like I always keep my inbox open. If you're having an issue like shitty family or you don't know how to navigate student funding where you're estranged or anything like that, I'm always happy to chat people through it. So yeah, there's not really an organisation offering specific services for estranged queer young people. LGBT Scotland are trying to do some stuff, not trying to do some stuff, they're incorporating estrangement into like their manifestos and things, and they offer loads of other like really cool resources and groups and stuff.
Sorry, I'm in the middle of trying to balance food. It is dinner time, or it's an attempt at dinner time to try and keep us going. I do apologise if it looks like I'm distracted.
No, you're fine.
So yeah, I think it's one of those. Sorry, go on, Sky.
If you want to focus on your food right now, someone in the chat, IndieRef2 Electric Boogaloo, said that people underestimate how traumatic it is, as well, even if it ends well in the end. Like that process of estrangement.
Yeah, definitely. Because I always try and be optimistic. Like estrangement is a positive thing. Like if someone is setting boundaries and saying, this person or this member of my family or my whole family is toxic and talking shite and making me feel unwelcome, I'm going to set my own boundaries and go off and do my own thing. That is actually a really cool and positive thing. What's not cool or positive is the lack of support, but yeah, even when you're going through it, it is super traumatic, especially because estrangement is super linked to child abuse and family abuse that starts in that sort of middle period between like 15, 16 through like early 20s. If you're over 16, you don't get access to the care system, but if between 16 and 18, you're still viewed as a child. So like there are 16-year-olds out there who are getting like abused at home or are made to feel unwelcome in the home and they don't have anywhere else to go. You know, it is super traumatic. And I know he's had the End Conversion Therapy group earlier on. I'm part of that group. I'm sort of involved. I consider what happened to me to be conversion therapy, under the broad sort of definition of it, you know, trying to repress or deny someone's sexuality or stop them expressing it. That's definitely what happened to me. Like, what happened to me would be considered emotional abuse, psychological abuse, conversion therapy. It's not just falling out. Like, there's a sort of, when you say estrangement, some people can think, you know, like, oh, I had a falling out and we're not talking. But it's like a much more sort of serious, permanent breakdown. You mentioned earlier about definitions. So the old definition that SAS used to use, so the Scottish Awards Agency for Scotland, like the student finance people,
Yeah.
the old definition they used was you have to have no contact with anyone in your family for 12 months to be classified by them as estranged. And that is just total shit. Like, that is not what estrangement looks like at all. Aside from anything else, what do you do for the 12 months without any family support?
I was gonna say, like,
Yeah.
at what point is there like the realization? I mean, people will need support almost immediately, and it's potentially those 12 months that are the most harmful.
Yeah. And the the whole 12-month thing actually kept people in really harmful situations. I have a lot of anger directed at SAS and building up over a few years. But yeah, like, there was times when I was forced to sort of remain in contact with my family because they were able to sort of provide some, like, not any regular financial support, but they were the only safety net I had. I tried to explain to SAS my situation, like, you know, like, I desperately want to sort of cut off ties. These people are awful, these people are homophobic, these people are abusive. You know, like, when was the last time you spoke to them? I was like, well, yesterday, because they phone me every day because that's part of the abuse, like coercive control, super like surveilling relationships, and total power dynamic stuff. And they're like, oh, well, if she phoned you yesterday, then you're not estranged. I was like, I know I'm not estranged. I'm trying to become estranged. But thankfully, this like SAS and other government agencies are starting to move away. After the campaign, they've changed their definition from 12 months to normally 12 months, but they review it on a case-by-case basis. If you can show there's like a permanent breakdown, you qualify as estranged and you get a lot of additional support, which is really good. Like, it's a lot easier to be an estranged student. Well, not a lot easier, but, you know, relatively to how shit it was before.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like kind of moving in the right direction. Still a wee bit of, well, still a fair bit of work to be done, but it's definitely good to hear that there's movement there. Especially because it just seems to be such a. It sounds so like devastating for folk at like that young an age to then, you know, try and have to fight bureaucracy as well isn't healthy.
Oh yeah, it's awful. You're having to like bear your life story to some person at the SAS call centre who's like a lovely person, but they have no training on how to handle it, and there's nothing they can do. Yeah, thankfully it's becoming a lot easier to just be like, I'm estranged, just trust me. People like SAS are starting to do that, which is good.
Yeah. We've heard
Yeah.
a lot of. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, looking at the chat, wasn't lying when he said it was depressing. Yeah, this is super depressing. But it's getting better a little bit. I mean, it is. You know, we won't actually stop family rejection and stuff, but part of it is if we tackle like homophobia and transphobia more broadly, it will actually reduce the rates of estrangement. And in the meantime, providing like comprehensive support for people going through it is sort of the best we can do.
Yeah,
It's
Scott Cuthbertson's saying that you've done a fantastic job on the issue. So that's a shout out from Scott Cuthbertson from who is not sorry, Equality Network.
The Equality Network.
Yeah,
That is very kind. I can't take all the credit. There's like a
sleep
really
deprivation kicking in.
We're getting there.
there's like a really strong sort of group of like estranged students, basically on Discord and on Twitter. That's the only way we sort of campaign and mobilize and stuff. But like talking about it a lot. We've managed to get meetings with like government ministers, with MSPs, just by being really loud about it and shouting at them. It's pretty good.
So I've got kind of three real points here. The first is our next speaker is also ready to hop in and join the four of us.
Magic.
Just
I
if
can
everyone's
step
ready.
out if you need.
It's quite alright, Casey. You can be here if you want. You can not be if you want. And yeah, like EU Matt 331 in our chat says, having been the guy in the call center who can't do anything and has no training, it's soul destroying. Which is, I suppose that's probably a good way, like, question. These systems, I think, do. It kind of ties into my third point. Like, a lot of what we've heard from speakers today is not even about like necessarily the system failing, but just the system not providing for people in any way. Like, you know, the system failing implies that there is some infrastructure there that's not working. Whereas in some cases, at least I felt, there just hasn't been infrastructure to help people at all, be it, you know, LGBT people and wider issues or estrangement or and so I guess my very long way of getting to the question is, what kind of systematic reform or addition do you think could really help here?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's not out of malice, you know, like the Scottish government hasn't sat down one day and like, oh, you know, what can I do? We're going to totally neglect this pretty sizable group. It's just that the people who are like responsible for all these decisions probably went to university when it was just all grants. They didn't have to worry about loans or whatever. And if they got into the Scottish government, probably had a pretty stable family and lots of support from them. So it's not that they don't care; they've just never really thought about what it's like to be a student without a family. So just like trying to get them to listen. It's like super. It seems like small things, but you know, it used to be the case that in all the sort of the letters from the university's minister that go out via SAS and stuff, even still during the pandemic, it's like, oh, when you go home to your family, all of the advice was about for Christmas was about going home to your family. And like, there are so many students, like estranged students, care experienced students, mature students, whose home is where they go to uni. Like, I live at what you would call term time accommodation, but it's my home, you know? So it's just pretty obvious they've just never really thought about it because they have no experience of it. So in terms of structural stuff, I think it's good to have actual representation in politics. So, you know, especially young people. There's only one MSP in his 20s out of 129, and there's like a third of the population are like under 30. So if like a third of Scotland has one representative who looks like them vaguely, obviously the systems aren't going to work for all young people. Yeah, that's why it's cool to have more queer people running for Parliament, more queer people in Parliament, more women in Parliament, people of colour in Parliament. Like, diversity isn't just like a good thing in principle, it also just makes better decisions.
And I think it's interesting that you know, it's almost like they haven't experienced it, so they don't consider it.
Yeah.
And I think I know this sounds like a total aside, but I think it's tied really closely to it. But there's kind of like quite a big problem in technology companies at the moment in regards to they're manufacturing like, you know, hot solutions that for just by the nature of who runs the organization, they're not actually like factoring in you know, different, whether it's different sexualities or genders or, you know, races or you know, like whatever. Because I think there was one issue, and I don't want to stray too far away from the LGBT point, but it was like they were creating a product that would you know, it was like a blow dryer in like a toilet or whatever. But they'd built it. It was like a smart dryer that scanned your hand and knew exactly when there was no water particles left, and it was all very fancy.
Mm-hmm.
But they hadn't ever tested it on someone who was, you know, not white. And what they found was it didn't work.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of feeding into that. They don't you know, they don't experience it, so they don't test for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Remember the Twitter algorithm thing where they would crop photos and they would only put the white people in the cropped bit of the photos? Like, it's not done out of malice, it's just they've not really thought because it's not their own experience.
While also, we have another speaker, Fiona, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Hello everyone, I'm Fiona Robertson. I am the co-chair of the Disabled Members Group for the SNP. I'm also the co-chair for Out for Indie, which is the LGBT wing. And you've had quite a few of our members on so far today, so that's great.
Yeah, great to see you again, Fiona. Thanks very much for joining. I'm sorry if I'm a bit distracted. I'm both trying to eat and trying to play. I've not had any food today, so I'm trying to catch up. Besides raisins, I'm now tucking into some food finally.
I bet the chat can go back and hear how like me and I segues were like so much more smooth at the start of the stream, and now we're 10 hours in and we're like, hello, who are you?
On the bright side, Fiona, you might see we're 10 hours in and we're $4,000 up.
I know, it's absolutely incredible. Well done.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's generosity today has just been daft. It's Sky, do you want to maybe start with a couple of light questions? We're not going in for a serious conversation.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah, don't worry.
How are you?
How am I? I'm good. The chat is making me grin quite a lot. Thank you very much, everyone. You're all lovely, and you all keep me going. It's been a rough couple of weeks. I won't lie. It's probably the hardest in politics for me, which is kind of saying something, really. But yeah, it was also very sunny today, so that was nice. And in Aberdeen, that's quite rare, so it was good.
Did you manage to get out at all, or even in the garden?
Yeah, I stood in my doorstep.
Hey, that counts.
Look at
Take what we can get.
Exactly. I am an Aberdonian, yes. I mean, technically I'm from the Shire, but yes. Yeah, I am a tutor. My teacher used to call me the Queen of the Tutors because I passed the most cows on the way into school.
Oh, I am a tutor as well, actually. Just.
Excellent.
I'm in Glasgow.
We are
now,
the
though.
best. See, everyone leaves for Glasgow.
Yeah.
Like, all of our friends have left over the last 6 years. It's really depressing.
Unfortunately, Sky's also left for Glasgow.
Yep.
For studying, though, in fairness.
Okay, that's more allowable.
Yeah,
Well
it is for
permitted.
education.
So,
Excellent.
We had.
there we go. Sorry. Boss beaten.
I suppose the standard question is, do you want to maybe just tell us a bit more about your God, you can tell I study film because I nearly said backstory.
Yes, my narrative.
What stage in what plot developments got you to this stage in the story?
Okay, as I said, I grew up in the Shire, in Aberdeenshire, and it was lovely. Not great when you're a teenager, because you don't really appreciate that you're surrounded by all this stunning beauty stuff when you really just want to go to the pub, and the only people in the local pub are people who've known you since you were very tiny. So I went to uni to study theoretical physics at 19, and that was where I got sick. And that kind of started the whole saga of my life, which was it was 15 years before I was diagnosed, and this is one of the big problems that we've got, is that especially if you're a woman, and your condition is a pain or energy limiting type of condition, then you're just really not taken seriously at all by any kind of medical professionals. So it was, if you can hear my husband in the background, by the way, he is also playing games. So
That's no worries.
he's just doing his thing. So yeah, I got sick. I woke up one day and I couldn't walk very well, and that was kind of it. Over 6 months I lost my ability to walk and my ability to think or read, and I needed full-time care, and it was I had to come home. Obviously, I needed care, and I was kind of locked into this world where I didn't know anyone who could help me, because the only people that you really come into contact with are doctors who are really bad for disability, as it turns out, and other able people. And it was kind of a chance meeting with disability activists that changed the course of my life. It was they gave me context and the politics of being disabled and what it really means, and how much of it's based in our society and not in a failure in you, and where worth comes from and all that kind of stuff. And it was it literally, quite literally, saved my life. Because I was on that track. There's these 3 stories you get told about disability in general society, and one of them is that if you don't get better, then suicide's the obvious next step. That is the solution. That's what we see all the time, and I was on that track. And these activists were like, no, your life is not a tragedy. It certainly doesn't look like you expected it to, but most people's doesn't. Most people don't end up living the life that they imagined when they were young, and we all get to this stage, and your life can still be great. So and then I started going through the ATOS system, and that was where I got radicalized into going and standing outside offices and screaming at passers-by that they were killing us, and that they needed to help us stop them. Yeah, that was essentially where I got started. I had 3.5 years where I needed full-time care, and I was a full-time wheelchair user when I could go outside, which wasn't very often. I recovered enough to be able to go and do stuff like this, which I'm grateful for, because it means that I was able to meet a lot of good people. But it's been a long road, and it's still something that we're still so far behind as a movement. Like, it's such a new movement, that we are only just really beginning to become coherent, and it's so much of what we need to do, and so much of what we've been trying to do is this kind of outreach, because most disabled people don't have access to this information. Many, including, like, I was actively discouraged by doctors from seeking out other disabled people to talk to, because they said that it would embed this victim narrative in your head, and not, these are the people who can give you context and tell you about your rights and tell you about your how to navigate the world and how to get on with things, because we don't tend to be born into families who have this knowledge. So we don't get born into families who can tell us, these are your rights, here's how to advocate for them, here's where your worth is, here's who you are, this is something to be proud of. And we all kind of rely on, it's not taught in schools, it's not taught in any of our media, and so we kind of rely on just trying to get it out by word of mouth, trying to grab people into the disability community as we can and gather them up and say, no, it's okay, you are enough, you're entitled to be part of this. This is really, really important, that you become part of this community, because that's we have these different experiences, but we're all fighting the same system, and that's the same kind of across the intersections of other oppressions as well. That there's disability is quite often the consequence of other people's marginalization. Trauma causes disability, and oppression causes disability. So there are these huge overlaps, and we're all fighting the same system, and it affects us in different ways, but we're so much stronger when we're all working together. So that's my aim these days is that kind of coherent intersectional work, because when we're all standing with each other and showing up for each other, then we seem to get a lot further and a lot better than we do when we're all just fighting over scraps. So there you go. Not especially concise history, but history nonetheless.
No, that was great, and it's I'm not gonna lie, it's tough hearing it. Not from a it's horrible. It's just it's terrible what our kind of systems put a lot of people through. When you were talking about what ATOS does, and that kind of thing, especially in regards to like social security. I suppose one of the things I kind of want to pick up on, if that's okay, because I thought it was really interesting, was you talked about the politics of being a disabled person. And one of the kind of themes that we've had throughout this is that, like, there's almost... We were talking about activism earlier, and how, you know, a lot of people are almost forced into activism because of who they are. As in, there's no other stance to take. And I'm interested in Blair. If you're hanging about, you can jump in on this as well. But like, just by the very nature of who people are, they are having to be political activists, even if they don't necessarily want to be. Blair, do you want to maybe start on that?
Yeah. Hi Fiona, it's good to see you.
Hello.
Well, hear from you. Yeah, like I don't think anyone signs up to become an estrangement advocate. It just sort of happens because I was tweeting about it, and then people would message you like, "Oh, hi, how do you navigate this system?" Because like Fiona's right, like this stuff isn't publicly available. Like you have to have a lot of social capital. You have to have like good people around you. You have to have community. You have to know people who know things, because that's sort of how people have to navigate systems. Like government systems are not designed to be accessible for the people who sort of need them most. Like benefits are designed to be hard for poor people to get, and disabled people to get, and people without families to get. Like the government sort of has an incentive to make it really difficult to get stuff done.
Yeah.
Fiona, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, before the pandemic, I ended up I was in a pub after a vigil with some friends from disparate types of activism, but we all always show up to the same things all the time. And we were talking about the lives, like the things that we'd be doing if we didn't have to be doing this. Like one of them wanted to be an actor, I wanted to be a scientist, another wanted to be a writer. These are all, this isn't, I don't particularly, it's tough to go around talking about a lot of the most traumatic things that have happened in your life. But it is necessary. Both because I don't have all of my rights yet, and I want them, but also because I don't want other people to have to go through any of the stuff that I've gone through. I don't want people to be left alone on this. I don't want it to be down to chance that people might meet the people who can say, you have inherent value. You don't need to be economically viable in order to be allowed to exist. And your life is, you can have a fantastic life. You can have an amazing life. And this thing about the benefits is absolutely essential. And I was lucky enough to be part of the system, part of the group which wrote the charter for the new Scottish social security system. And our entire premise for that was that it would be based fundamentally differently. And the reason it's taking so long is because initially they believed that they would be able to adapt the DWP system, and then in the first wee wave of research that they did, they realized that they absolutely couldn't. Because the problem with the DWP is not that it's broken. It is functioning exactly as it is intended to function. It is a massive shift of funds from the public sector to the private sector, and it is designed to be as inaccessible as possible to the people who need it the most. It is a system which is, its fundamental principle is that everyone is trying to defraud you, and it's the system's job to catch you. Whereas we wanted in Scotland the system to be, people need help and they should be supported, and have that be the priority. And yes, have some checks, have, a monitor for fraud, for like full organized fraud, but there does not need to be this. I mean, it's an act of violence. What is done, the way that it is set up is designed to be as harmful as possible to put people off getting the help that they are entitled to. That these are basic human rights. That I mean, I ended up attempting suicide after my last major interaction with them. I know people who've been institutionalized. I know people who've died after it, because it is just brutal and cruel and intentionally so. Because it's not that they don't know that their actions are causing harm. They absolutely do. That's the point.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
I know.
and-
Sorry, I know a few people who believe that they might be autistic, and I've obviously asked them, like, have you thought about going to get diagnosed? And like, I just don't think I can go through that. It's like, I don't think I have the energy to go through that, and I fully understand them with that. Sorry, Blair, I cut you off.
No, not at all. I was just gonna say, I was listening to the conversion therapy group earlier, and what Sophie was saying about, like, she didn't sign up to be like a trans activist, but like, being in part of a marginalised community, like, no one else is gonna fight for you. Like, being disabled or being estranged or being trans, like, no one else. These aren't like popular things. Like, no one is going to do it unless we do it ourselves. Which means it's left to super vulnerable, super marginalised people who have enough on as it is to have to be like, oh yeah, this is all of my trauma, and try and like fight the government on stuff. Like, it would be nice if like the government just sort of proactively helped people.
What a magical idea.
That would be that'd be great.
Like, to get. Sorry, I don't want to talk too much about Strange, but cat. But before anything got done, there was like a roundtable event at the Scottish Parliament, and they were like, oh yeah, we'll talk about estrangement. And I had to like stand up and be like, okay, this is how I was abused as a child, and this is my experience of conversion therapy, and like, this is how I felt suicidal after talking to this government agency. And I was like, why do I have to go up and like bail my trauma when you know there's a problem? Like, why isn't that enough for you to just like, okay, we'll fix this? Like, it was like a sort
Absolutely.
of weird tragedy poem of people having
Yeah.
to get on telly and get on the 9 and be like, oh yeah, this is my terribly shit life, and the government go, oh, maybe we should do something about this. I was like, did you
Yeah.
not think before that you should do something about this?
I mean, it's
feels
not like there's not research.
It
Yeah.
feels like we're begging for sympathy, effectively, where it's like, just help us, with any issue that kind of requires that.
And that has its own cost, and that's something that we talk about in disability activism, or I talk about quite a lot, is that it positions us into this thing where we're seen as the people who need to be helped and not the people who can do the helping.
That's
So
also true, yeah.
it makes it really hard when you're trying to be involved in like political work, because then you are seen as, you're kind of very clearly sorted into a category of not the person who can be the provider of services, and that makes it a really difficult barrier to cross, because it isn't so much that it's kind of framing you as a victim, but when your knowledge and experience is not treated as you say, this kind of misery porn, rather than as expertise and insight, then it gives it a really weird cast in terms of the lens that people see you through, and it's they kind of sort you into a category where you don't really belong.
Yeah. Prince Tips in the chat made a great point, where it's like, if you advocate for yourself, you aren't seen as disabled enough.
God, yeah, it's one of the reasons why we are really adamant that anonymous accounts must be allowed to stay, because so many disability activists need to remain anonymous because of the DWP trawling for like oh look, you tweeted 5 times in an hour, therefore you're not actually you could work a full day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They are absolutely vicious.
Yeah, it's horrible that we've got a system that's that warped. I mean, I can only hope that, you know, with the Scottish social security stuff that you've worked on, that we're gonna kind of like, to be honest, it seems to be a completely cultural thing, in the worst kind of possible form that can take. So good to see that we're kind of moving away from it as much as we can, with what we've got.
I mean, this is why I switched sides. I was a lifelong unionist. Hilariously.
Well, thank God you said that before I did, because also so was I.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
you know,
I voted no. I'm sorry.
I switched in 2013, so it was before the referendum, but I was very much the people who were trying to make the arguments to me up until this point were like waving flags at me and saying, you know, autonomy and stuff, and I was like, my life literally relies on the state. I can't take any risks when it comes to destabilizing that. And then I was at a Blair Jenkins, who was head of the Yes campaign.
Yeah, director, I think.
Yeah, he did this amazing thing where essentially, like, he went village by village around Scotland, and like in my tiny wee village in the Shire, then he came to our little community theatre and did a talk. And my brother had said, "I will stop going on about this if you go to this talk," and I thought that was a pretty good deal, so I went along. And in this talk, someone else asked about. I asked about the disability thing. I said, you know, I have these really terrible experiences, and he made the valid point that you know, he would hope that we wouldn't approach it like that. But that wasn't what changed my mind. Someone else asked about Europe, about the risk of leaving Europe, and he just said, you know, we know that we are a dedicated European country, and I would ask you where the real threat lies to our membership of the European Union. And I just, my head kind of just, my world tilted on its axis, and I suddenly realized that by that point I had spent 10 years fighting for my life with the British state, and I had not viewed that as the risk. And when I actually took a step back and looked at where the real risk to my life lay, then I could trust that. I went and did a ton of research at this stage and thought, you know, okay, I'm obviously missing something here, and went back to first principles and looked at how people had voted, looked at how politicians had actually acted and the things that they had, the policies they'd put in place. And that was when I discovered that all of the lies that I've been told about the SNP were lies, and that, you know, other people can say very nice words, but it doesn't mean that they ever back it up with action. And I looked at the policies that have been put in place, and I thought, I can trust that even if independence is hard, which it will be, it's not going to be bread and roses. It's going to be hard, but I can trust that my life will be a priority in that country in a way that it certainly is not in this one. And that was when I switched. I was just like, right, okay, now must dedicate my life to getting independence so that we can build a country that can actually function and do something useful for disabled people. So yeah.
Absolutely. And I suppose it's probably worth linking back to the topic at hand. But I mean, how do you think that relates into, you know, bringing everyone with us into an independent Scotland? I'm for anyone watching, if you haven't figured it out, AyeforScotland is unequivocally pro-independence, and I suppose it's more of a like obviously there's been a lot of talk just kind of around, whether it's GRA reform or anything like that. And we don't need to go too deep into it because I know it's a very tough subject. But like bringing everyone with us into a kind of independent country. I feel like a lot of what you're saying kind of speaks a bit to that. What's the point in replicating Westminster up here and all the systems that are in place?
Exactly. And I think that there's a really big problem, and I know relating to the GRA in this as well, and to the problems that we've got in the SNP at the moment. There's a lot of this talk about, but what about the membership and bringing the membership with us on things like equalities mechanisms and the equalities issues which need to be dealt with. And the reality is that we are the membership. Overwhelmingly, if you take the number of marginalized people that exist in any party or community or country, we make up the bulk of people. Cis, straight, abled white men are a minority as a group, but they are seen as the full, as the real people, and the rest of us are special interests. And I think that kind of making people understand just how many of us there are and how many of us how many people these things affect, and especially with disability. I mean, disability is the one that is just fundamentally ridiculous for people not to give a shit about, because any day in your life could be the day that you join this marginalized group. You have no idea it's coming. You have absolutely no capacity to stop it. And there's everyone should care about this. And everyone should care about all of them, but people are often, we're kind of trained to be individualistic. But this is from a purely selfish point of view, we should all care about this. When people use the phrase special interest groups, I've taken to just asking, do you mean other members? Because we are the members. Like, we are the membership just as much as everyone else is. And it is, if we want to bring the membership with us, then at the moment there's a huge problem with people don't realize how hard it is to go into a hostile environment, or into an environment which could be hostile. Like, I was talking to an autistic man the other night about this, and to a man of color about this the other night. And it's the same kind of experience, that we take this huge risk anytime we go into a new environment, whether it's a branch or a new meeting or a new movement or an action or whatever. We take a big risk because we don't know if this is going to be a hostile place, if this is going to be somewhere where people are discriminatory or bigoted or whatever. And so when we do that and something bad happens, then we don't, if we're not already invested, then we just leave. And so there's this huge number of members that we're missing because people have just left rather than staying and fighting, because staying and fighting is exhausting and dispiriting. And if you don't have a specific reason for staying and fighting with this particular group, then it's an awful lot of risk and trauma for what is likely not to work. And so if we want to bring people with us, the people who already want an independent Scotland for its own sake are already on board. The vast bulk of the people who joined after 2014 are people who wanted a better Scotland, who saw a vision of a better country for us to be part of. And this idea that we should ignore that is really is ridiculous in electoral terms. It is. These are the people who will get us to independence. These are the people that we need to show we can do something different. And yeah.
I mean, it's really interesting to hear that point, because I've always kind of said, and sorry Sky, I think I cut you off there, but like in terms of, I've always kind of thought it's like the real fun work will be actually after we become independent, because we'll actually get to like shape a country, which is even cooler.
Absolutely.
And I'd much prefer to be, like, you know, as delighted I will be screaming and crying and everything when we actually do like get that yes vote. Like the actual graft afterwards to build a country is what I'm kind of looking forward to most.
Yeah. I just want to say we have another speaker who's joined us, and would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello, hi. This is Mridul Wadhwa. I am a manager of a rape crisis center. I'm a trans woman. I'm actually on the board of the Equality Network. So, a real thank you to everyone who's donated. The funds are welcome. I'm also a migrant. I grew up in India and moved to Scotland about 16 years ago. And I used to be in the SNP. So Fiona was talking about a little bit about me, and now I'm a member of the Green Party. So that's me.
Hey, it's so nice to hear you.
It is nice to. I've been listening to you, so I've been enjoying that.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for joining us, Mridul.
You're welcome.
We've had a fantastic time so far. Our initial target was £500, and we're now over 4,000, which is just
It's
mind-blowing.
incredible.
So yeah.
I think Blair needs to head off in a minute.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'll head off soon. I will leave you to the new guests.
Just before you go, is there any social media or anything that you would want to plug, or any websites, movements that you want to push to our audience?
Nothing in particular. I am always happy to help out and advise on estrangement stuff, especially student finance stuff. I can help out with that. I'm also happy to just lend an ear or a shoulder if folk want to talk about shitty families. So you can find me on Twitter at BlairAnderson35. And I have a policy of always keeping my inbox open so anyone can message. And probably my last plug is I would definitely, and no offence to Fiona who's also on, but I would definitely encourage you to vote Green in May. I think it's really interesting what you just said about. Say that again, Fiona.
I'm outnumbered.
Sorry. For what? For once. For once, the SNP is outnumbered. Yeah, it's really interesting what you're saying about this independence is a chance to build a different country. There's nothing that puts me off independence quite like the people like Salmond and Cherry, like, oh, independence, and we don't care who we have to betray to get there. Like, that is the most off-putting thing in the world. Like, independence, like, I'm a green socialist. My vision of independence is new constitution, human right to housing, human right to food, human right to money. Like, imagine the state just provided as default enough for everyone to have a good life. Like, that is not an impossible vision. So yeah, sorry Fiona. I don't mean to rail you. I would definitely encourage everyone to vote Green, and if not, just vote. That's always a good thing.
That is important.
Tory.
Yeah,
Yes.
just vote.
Just for the record, not Tory.
Not Tory. Sorry, I thought that was implied. Yeah, okay, I'll head off. It was lovely to see you all. Thank you for having me on, and thank you for raising money for the Equality Network.
Perfect. Thanks so much for your time, Blair, and we'll
Thank you,
chat soon.
See you soon.
I just wanted to say, I think Janie Godley has retweeted us.
Oh, groovy.
Oh wow.
Message her, ask if she wants to join in.
Oh my god, that would be hilarious.
Oh yeah.
I mean, why not? I think we've got an opportunity to be a wee bit bold.
Yeah, she's usually up for stuff. So
Yeah.
like she's great whenever we contact her from OFI. and say, "Hello, can you do a thing?"
Yeah, let's do it. I'm really enjoying. Like, I'm sure everyone in the chat can kind of testify to this as well. But like, all of the speakers so far have been absolutely amazing, as well as our two current ones. So let's continue that conversation while I try not
Three
to
current
die.
ones. Casey is still in the call. 3 current speakers.
Oh, of course. Oh, sorry, Casey.
Oh, I'm just keeping quiet here because I want to let other people speak. But I'm playing some Slay the Spire while this. Don't worry.
That's no worries.
That's quite alright.
But
Sorry.
I just didn't want to interrupt anybody. I kind of did want to jump in with a point that I believe Fiona was making. That as far as not knowing when you might actually join the disabled community, I think with COVID-19, this is something we all have to keep in mind, that it's if you catch COVID, if you recover, there is a chance you could be suffering with what they're calling long COVID or post-viral syndrome. And I don't know if I spoke about this. I've been suffering for the last few years with maybe 5 or 6 years now with chronic fatigue and chronic pain. And the reason I think I have this is because I caught glandular fever, and I was horribly ill for a while with that. I was in so much pain that I had to take painkillers to be able to swallow food because it felt like my throat was closing up. I was in a horrible way, and since then I was exhausted. I was not able to do basically half of what I did. It sometimes I would just crash, have no energy, whatever. I've been kind of struggling to recover since. So especially now, it is extremely important to recognize that yes, you might be in the same in the same situation at some point. So
I mean, this is. I'm going to jump in and go on a rant now. This is something that like my pinned tweet in my Twitter feed is from March last year, and of the disability community saying this is going to go badly for a lot of people. You are all acting as if the two choices are die or recover, and that's not true. There is going to be a very large cohort of people who don't recover to their previous health, and that's fine, but we are not set up for it. And like, we are already struggling, all our services are already struggling, and you're going to have this large cohort of newly disabled people all entering the care, benefits and health system at the same time, and we are not set up for this. And so any government needs to be dealing with this right now. And this is why having disabled people in Parliament would have been really useful, because nobody really listened to us. And now they're going, oh look, there's this long COVID thing, and we're like, yes, we literally told you it was going to happen, because I mean, there is a phenomenon in the disability community that I would love to see more formalized, which is called a disability doula, which is essentially you get assigned a disabled person to walk you through becoming disabled. So that's something that I've been working on as a "So You're Disabled Now" guide for people who have become disabled through this. But there's a real thing that we also think that like every long COVID person should be assigned an ME person to say, like, this is how you deal with hostile doctors. This is how you get treatment when they tell you that you're making shit up. This is how you deal with the benefit system. but there is a real the next term of parliament, this is going to be the single biggest thing. Like there's independence and there's all the financial recovery and everything, but this affects every single part of our legislative agenda. We don't have enough accessible housing. We don't have enough care. We don't have a medical system which can cope with post-viral or any kind of fatigue syndromes. There's already medics talking about how, oh, this isn't really a post-viral syndrome, this is real. And as if like the rest of us who've been dealing with this shit for decades, kind of reinforcing this idea that these aren't real when we were the people who warned about them and knew that it was going to happen. So there's this, like with my condition, I have a genetic condition, but it doesn't necessarily turn into its acute form. Many people with it kind of go through their full lives just being bendy and nothing else. And it can turn acute, and we've never worked out if mine turned acute because of a major head injury I got or a major flu thing I got. And my initial diagnosis was post-viral fatigue syndrome. And so watching all this unfold has been really kind of heartbreaking, because if they just listened, like if disabled people had been part of our society all along, then imagine how much easier this year would have gone. Imagine how much easier it would have been to switch to remote working if we hadn't been told it was literally impossible for the last 20 years. And then it took 2 weeks to do it. And like representation isn't just a kind of nice abstract idea. It's because we can help put in the systems that mean that when stuff like this happens, we can say, you know, this is how this is going to go. We know how this is going to go because we've seen it, we've experienced it, this is our lives. And here are the nuances that all of you very healthy people really don't get. There's my rant. Sorry, I could go on about this forever.
That's okay.
Riddle, do you maybe want to jump in? Do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I mean, Fiona's all right. I don't have a disability, but I have two siblings with a disability. One who has had it since she was infant, and my brother who has had MS, which has disabled him quite a lot, in the sense that restricted his movements, and he hasn't left his home for a year now, and they live in India, where there isn't anything at all that can allow them to live their full lives. And I have a new son who I've adopted this year, and he has a learning disability. And I hear this, and it has really brought all of what Fiona said into focus, but also in my work. And one of the biggest challenges we have, the building that I work in, is that it is not accessible. And we're looking to relocate, and one of the hardest things when we first started looking to relocate before the pandemic was to find accessible buildings that also met our therapeutic needs. Like we needed to recreate a therapeutic space in a home, and it's just not available. And as someone who's experienced marginalization throughout my life as a trans woman, and growing up in India as someone who grew up in an interfaith marriage where one community expelled their women. So my mother was ostracized by her faith community for marrying outside the faith. I'm so used to being on the outside of everything as a trans woman, and here in Scotland as a woman of color as well, that my mind always goes to, thinking about who's left out in the room. But I do think that I would say till I really started listening and became responsible for making decisions in the workplace, and and thinking more about the disabilities that are there in my family, that I began to see how little disabled people have a voice and are able to contribute in building our society. And we often don't even think to ask, forget, include. And the point is that it should be about co-design, and that's just missing. As a trans woman, I can say that we are missing as well when decisions are being made. Trans people are missing when decisions are being made about our lives and state. And there are fewer people, there are fewer of us. There are so many disabled people who do wonderful things. I worked on a project with a disabled academic who now works in England but was at the University of Glasgow. And I co-wrote a chapter with one of my colleagues on forced marriage and learning disability, because I dealt with a number of cases of forced marriage in Scotland where the women, and they were mostly women, who had significant learning disabilities, and how hard it was for their concerns to be heard when they were saying that they were at risk of forced marriage, or when their workers or carers were saying that, when we were saying that as women's aid workers, and how we were not listened to. Yeah, I feel like I'm gonna rant, but yeah, there's so much intersection of progression. And if we just had if we were at the table as equals, and if there isn't place at the table, get a bigger table. We would have a better country. More people would be alive today.
I think that this is one of the biggest issues with, especially with disability and its intersections with violence. I wrote an article a couple of years ago now about the problems with being a disabled woman in particular who is trying to get out of an abusive situation when you literally can't run, and specifically when you're the person who is likely to be your abuser is your carer, and they are the person who is treated as if they are the gods on earth and the kindest and loveliest people, and look at you being so strong and not leaving the disabled person. And these kind of narratives have a real material cost. They are absolutely devastating. And given that disabled women are many times more likely to become victims of sexual assault, of rape, of domestic violence, then these are almost never going to see justice for it, especially if your disability is mental illness. If you're a mentally ill woman, there's nothing you can do. You will never be seen as a credible witness, and you will never be treated as if your report is valid, which means that women with mental illnesses are 10 times more likely than the average woman to experience sexual assault, and it means that they're sought out as well, and especially when you get these cultural narratives about how crazy girls are really hot and crazy girls will do anything in bed and stuff like these stories, these narratives that we tell people, they have costs, and the cost is usually people's lives. It's incredibly hard, and we aren't even at the beginning of trying to deal with this. Like, we are so far behind on this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Not to butt in real quick. Myrtle, I don't. Do you want to maybe just say a bit more about your work? Just because I don't think we quite covered that when you joined.
Okay. Yeah. So I manage the Forth Valley Rape Crisis Center. Although I am on adoption leave and I go back to work in a few weeks, so I started adoption leave just at the beginning of lockdown, and so I've worked in the violence against women's movement since 2005 with the sabbatical when I moved back to India for just over a year. And for most of my life, working life in Scotland, I worked with Black minority ethnic women who experienced domestic abuse and forced marriage and any other form of gender-based violence. And before I started working in the Rape Crisis Centre that I manage now, I used to work for Rape Crisis Scotland on the national helpline, where I was supporting volunteers, preparing them to work on the helpline, and that was my job. And so currently, as the manager of the Rape Crisis Centre, we work with anyone over the age of 13 in Forth Valley who lives and works in Forth Valley. That's anyone living in Falkirk, Stirling, Clackmannanshire area who's experienced sexual violence or has been impacted by it. So it could be, it could have happened at any time in their life. And we also work with friends and family, as well as those who support survivors of sexual violence. So we work with essentially anybody over the age of 13 who's been impacted by sexual violence and who wants to use our service. And it's a therapeutic service, and I think a lot of what Fiona said just there resonates with us so much, because we see so many women and male survivors increasingly, as well as non-binary and trans people using our services these days, which is a real positive. But also, like, there's a diverse group of survivors accessing rape crisis services. I feel like there has been a positive shift in the last few years, just in the while that I've been working within the rape crisis movement, having moved over from Women's Aid, a real diversity in those who are coming forward. And I think as we are beginning to talk about sexual violence, as more survivors are beginning to talk about their experience of sexual violence, more survivors are able to come through. But these last 2 weeks have been really hard for me personally, looking at the discourse on perpetrators and people willfully not understanding, those who should, about how our criminal justice system works. Just because you did not receive a conviction does not mean that it did not happen. It just, we could not convict you, but that does not mean that it did not happen. And to hear that narrative, oh, well, they are completely innocent. Well, that's not what survivors and what I experienced. You may not have been convicted, but it did happen. Those are two separate stories. So yeah.
I've been trying to write a thing for the last, well, since the kind of court case started, but in particular in the last couple of days, about this magical world that these people seem to inhabit, where they think that protocols for investigating sexual harassment are really clear and work. And it's so very, very, very not true. Like the way that they seem to think that this works is catastrophic, and it feels like we've lost a lot of progress just because people have the standard idea that I like this person and therefore they can't have done this thing that is terrible, that we recognize as terrible.
I mean, the fact is that, like, if 1 in 4 or 1 in 3 women, and maybe 1 in 6 men, I mean, there are different statistics, but this is the one that comes to mind, have experienced sexual violence. And if in India, I would say that there isn't a single woman and trans person who's not experienced a form of gender-based violence. I have never met anybody, like you would say, like 98% of our population has experienced some form of gender-based of women and trans people and non-binary people would have experienced this violence. Like, if we know so many women, how come we don't know any perpetrators? Like, I had a friend who recently passed away, and it was after his death we found out that he had been charged just before his death with historic times of sexual violence, and you know, and you don't want to believe that, but it is. But if you know, like, but it's all around us. So why would we not know perpetrators of sexual violence who we love and trust? And then we, you know, and then you find out, and then you have to reevaluate these relationships and what they meant. And but you know, I'm pretty clear. I always believe survivors because I know how hard it is to come out as one.
I think that there's this huge problem with the way that people. The way I tend to frame it is that people have this logical fallacy that everyone believes that their own judgment is really good, and so they think I am a good person. Good people don't like rapists. I like that person, therefore, because I'm a good person, he can't be a rapist. And it's just it's a really insidious thing because it's based again in these narratives, these ideas that, and it's the same stuff that we see with all the kind of discussion around the GRA, is that, you know,
Yes.
that people don't grasp where the threat is coming from. The actual threat is the people that we love and the people that we live with, and that's an unbearable truth. So we just don't look at it, and we look at the scary strangers instead.
Yeah, I mean, it's so like the picture that is painted of the perpetrator, you know, is like this ogre, but they are not. They're as complex and multifaceted as we are, and so, you know, like, and I don't spend too much of my time thinking about perpetrators of sexual violence because that really that's not my business, so to speak. So I'm not, you know, like, I'm all for survivors. That's the work that I do. But, you know, obviously I'm surrounded by perpetrators. I know who they are. I see them. I have loved them in the past. And I might love them again, you know, like people who are perpetrators. And you just have to know that they are boring and ordinary very often in how they present themselves. Not all of them, but quite a few of them. Which is why I've decided that I will always believe survivors, and that is why I do the work that I do. You know, growing up in India, obviously I you know, I knew I was a rural woman from when I knew those words, I suppose. I just didn't understand why no one else could understand that. But so if the women around me were not teaching me or socializing me into my gender, because I do believe that is how you learn about womanhood. It's from other women, so I had to go and learn it from what I saw as an outsider. And it was interesting, really. Like, it didn't make sense at the time, but as I have critically evaluated it over the years and spent more time thinking about it, it was so interesting, the messages that I learned about what it means to be a woman and womanhood, and how I should live as a woman, even though the world was not willing to call me that, although my abusers in particular were able to see that as, you know, my transness as a vulnerability, and used it and exploited it. But it was so patriarchal, so rooted in stranger danger and keeping yourself safe from the eyes of strange men. But if you grew up in a society as India was then, and you know, parts of it have changed, and it's such a massive country, and parts of it have regressed, in my view, you will experience stranger violence, particularly sexual violence and sexual assault. And sexual violence is a very broad term, so from unwanted touching to name calling to whatever, in a way that you don't necessarily experience it here in Scotland in such a sort of obvious way. and so I learned that the perpetrator was outside, and that was being taught to the women and girls in my circle, in my family, in my community. So when the perpetrators, surprisingly, no surprise to me, were family members or friends or husbands or partners, they just really couldn't fathom that because there was no language to talk about them as perpetrators.
That's a really interesting difference in experience that I hadn't thought of. Thank you.
To be honest, I'm really hesitant about butting in. To be perfectly honest, I think. Go
on, button.
No, I'm not. I'm not even wanting to. I felt there was a silence that I might have to say something. So just tell everyone that I'm still technically awake. But I know it's an extremely sort of steep subject that we're speaking about. But like, I think, I'll probably speak for the audience on their behalf. But like, this is really insightful, and can I just say thanks? I'll fade into the background now. You can continue your conversation. But yeah, I was just saying it's really insightful stuff, and I can't add much to it. Is the only thing.
You can ask this. Go on, Fiona.
I do like the comment that I saw that was the part that you're playing right now with all the razor blades is very much like Tour's been the last 2 weeks.
Yeah. It's this is the Path of Pain, which is the hardest platforming section of the game. So there's lots of saws and there's lots of spikes, and yeah, you've just got to try and do your best.
I also think we have another speaker who would be ready to join us if everyone's okay with it.
Perfect.
Yes.
Sure.
Are you wanting me to jump off because I know that you're going to get all clogged up with people if you
can
let me
you
stay.
can say if you want to, Fiona.
I'm going
I
to
don't
duck out.
believe... Okay, Casey.
No worries, Casey. Thanks very much.
It was lovely to hear from you again.
Take
I'll
care.
drop back in later if you need me, but I don't want to take up any more space. Take care, everybody. And
Bye.
don't forget, quoth the raven, donate more.
Thanks very much, Casey.
Thank you, Casey. That was Casey Explosion, who you can follow on Twitter
And Twitch. And the quote the Raven thing was because as part of, I think it was 3,500, Casey did a full rendition of Quoth the Raven with David Paisley. It was incredible.
Amazing. I'm gonna have to. Is this gonna be?
This will be on YouTube. Don't you worry. If I
I
can,
believe David. Oh yeah, David Paisley played the Raven for reference.
yeah.
Amazing.
I'm sorry, I don't get this cultural reference. What is called the Raven?
It's the Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. It's a long Gothic poem.
I see.
That is very Halloweeny and fantastic.
Cool.
And if you were a goth child like I was, then there's also an amazing wee kids book about the Raven and about a girl who gets a raven that she calls Nevermore after this poem.
I was a very cheesy Bollywood child, and
Yes.
and I, before I got on, I was asked to think about if you're a gamer, which I'm not. I mean, I am, but I only play Candy Crush. I'm sorry.
That counts.
About my favorite movie, and I was like, oh my god, it's good. It is going to be a Bollywood movie, my favorite movie ever. I'm sure there are better ones. This is not necessarily the best one ever made or anything, but it came out at a time in my life where I needed it to come out. It's called Lamhe, which means, like one translation of it means moments or time. And it had my most favorite actress in the world, Sri Devi. She sadly passed away a few years ago, and I was devastated. But she helped me survive some really dark periods without even knowing it. And I really wanted her movies to be a hit. So, and Hindi movies would come out on Fridays, as they do sort of over here. And I used to go to the temple every Friday whenever her movie was out to pray for it to be a super hit, so that, you know, she would continue to make movies, because obviously actresses have shelf lives, unfortunately. But Lamhe did not do very well, but I've watched it like maybe 20 odd times. And it's just romantic and lovely and beautiful. Part of it was made in London or somewhere in England. And I was not all for Scottish independence then, so it didn't matter. Now I feel like, why did they not come to Scotland? It's a much better place. So, but yeah, that was me. Like, I visualized myself as a Bollywood actress, and that helped me survive some really dark times. And Sridevi was a significant part of that. Long may she be remembered.
No, thanks for sharing that. We have been asking people's favourite films or movies or games. Fiona, do you have anything to add?
Oh, good lord. There are so many things which have shaped me, and so Myrtle, you're talking about that it doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily the best thing, but it is the thing that you need at that moment. I have so many of these things that have kind of, like, when I first got sick, this is why all the weed and stuff's been really hard for me, is that Buffy was essentially what kept me going when I first got really sick and we didn't know what was happening, and I was slowly losing everything, and so it gave me this thing that I could be obsessed with, where there was this small girl who everyone underestimated, and she managed to save the world a whole bunch of times, and it was funny and it was silly and it made me cry, but it was something I could get lost in, and that was what I really needed at that moment. I needed something to focus on that wasn't my crumbling life. But Pratchett, I mean, I think that's my thing, like the Discworld, and it's woven into my soul in a way that that kind of deeply compassionate rage is what drives me most of the time.
Yeah, that works. Do it out of spite. Sorry, Sky.
Just while we're here, Kat, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello. My name's Kat. I'm Riddle's sort of neighbor in Edinburgh.
Hi, Kat.
Hi, we used to be neighboring branches of SMP. And Fiona, I know as well. I know both of you ladies, but I only know you virtually. We've never met in person. So after this strange year, yeah. But I'm the ally. I'm a boringly cis het white lady who's been married forever. I'm really happy to come on here and talk to you guys about equity and equality and all that good stuff.
Welcome, Kat.
It's so nice to hear you.
Yeah. I know we always have such a good time when we can hear each other talk.
Sorry, I've
What's
got a cat trying to
interesting-
steal my sushi, so apologies.
A different cat,
Excellent.
not the speaker.
No, not the speaker.
We now have a group of people who have all, to some extent, now worked together but never met in real life, which is an interesting welcome to charity in the 21st century.
Yeah.
Yay!
Hey, this was all about bringing people together. Can I just say, sorry, we've got one wee question in regards to donations. So yeah, cheating with bits or subscribing, any money that I get in my Twitch payout, my next one, will also be included in the donations. I'll just add that to the total. It won't add to the donation bar at the moment, but it'll go on top, and you've just cheered 1,000 bits, so thank you very much.
Thank you for the subscription as well.
Yeah, thank you, Eve. Sorry, continue.
We were mainly just talking about how excited we were to all be in the same virtual room again. Yay!
Yes.
I have a heavy hitting question for Kat, but I will wait a wee while to roll that one out.
I was going to say, give us 5 minutes, please.
Oh boy.
Ease in slightly.
How
I mean,
is everyone? We have been doing some fairly heavy hitting topics back to back here. How are we all doing?
I'm alright.
Good, I'm fine.
I'm just grinning away quite happily. These are the things that make it all good. Like I was talking earlier about how shitty activism can be because of all the trauma, but I love it as well. Like I genuinely love the work because of for you. But I love the people that I get to meet and the people that I get to work with. It just makes everything in my soul all happy and shiny and glittery, and it's an enormous privilege to get to do this.
Yeah, like it really is. Despite the fact that I are going loopy from Hollow Knight a little bit, I've watched this little bug creature jump up these walls so many times.
You're going to have it burned in the back of your eyes when you try and go to sleep now. You're going to do that thing like you did with Tetris if you're old enough to be like me, and like do it behind your eyes when you fall asleep.
Yeah, we're not even halfway through.
I'm fine. I'm absolutely a million pounds, dollars. I don't know.
Pounds.
Yeah, we're getting there. I'm just at a particular tricky bit, so sorry if I'm just not speaking.
Oh, it's fine. You know, I heard you guys earlier talking about how, like, there's an intersection of if you start being an activist or an advocate for something, then you start to branch out. And that's kind of how I feel like, you know, people say, why are you, well, they like to call people trans rights activists as an insult, but I don't really see it as an insult because, I don't know, it just seems like human rights activism to me. But it's like, why is this the thing? It's like, I don't pick who's being picked on, you know? So I think a lot of us meet at the different places where we see another group that's being marginalized and that, you know, needs a hand.
I think that's a really nice way of putting it, actually, because it's almost like you know, you don't pick who's getting attacked, and
Exactly.
if you stick up for one, then why wouldn't you stick up for the rest? You know?
The thing I keep saying to them, they're like, why do you talk about this all the time? And my answer is almost always, if you stop attacking them, then I won't need to. It's that simple. You're the person driving this. I'm not.
I just want to let you know we've been hit with like 8 or 9 hydrates.
Oh, right, okay. I suppose we better drink some water then. I am out of water. Oh dear.
Oh no! For reference, we have a little, effectively button in the chat can press to remind us to drink water.
That's very smart.
It's very good.
Yeah, it's been useful. Or there's also one to remind us all to us and the mods to all check our postures because we've all been bent over keyboards for 12 hours now. Well,
I should have been in our Tai Chi event earlier today. It was great. There was a sitting version.
I was lying in bed because I knew what was about to come for me.
The Tai Chi was great.
Yeah,
Oh,
I was
so good.
I do like a bit of Tai Chi.
It made me really emotional because it was one of these perfect events where it was, you had Sarah on earlier, so it was our lesbian campaign coordinator from OFI, and she was with the BAME network, and they also did this thing where they had someone who was leading accessible exercises, so you could do it sitting down and with minimal movements, and they told you like different ways that you could do it for different types of movement issues. And it was just so lovely. It was like, yes, this is what intersectional work is like, is where we all are working together. And like Kat said, you know, you pull on one thread and then everything else, you start seeing all the other things that need done as well, and you begin to see the big structure that needs to be challenged. And and when you get events like this, then it shows you the positive side of that we are, you know, when we work together, we do these amazing things.
Yeah.
But my cat
100%.
did keep trying to bite my hand when I was doing the arm movements, because he was like, there are all these ones where you kind of put your hands out in front of you and like you're holding an energy ball, and he was like, oh, this must be a hug for me. I'm going to stand on your knees, and why aren't you hugging me? I'm going to bite your hand now.
What's the cat's name?
That one is called Taliesin. He is the big ginger lump that is invasively affectionate. I also have a small black cat called Sprite, because she looks like a soot sprite, but she's much more skittish.
Well, my big ginger lump is called Phelan, and my small tortoise cat is called Aoife. And they almost sound identical to your cats, in personality and look.
I used to have cats when I was a child, and we had this one mother cat, and I had named her. I mean, I don't know what I was thinking, but her name was Selena. And we found her off the street, and she was quite feral, and was impossible to get her spayed. So she used to have kittens all the time, and then I used to be the midwife. I also used to name all these wee kittens till they found homes, or we had to go leave them in the fish market. It was India, so it's a completely different ethic there, and all the names were hilarious now that I think of it. Like once there were 3 kittens that were born, they were all female cats, and I decided I would name them after my grandmother and her 2 sisters who lived in the same city as us, and I mean they were not happy because of the reasons why I gave them the names. So one of them was a real nag, like she would right? So that was my grandmother, and then another one had she had a problem with her eye, like it just sort of keep closing up all the time when she was wee. So she was named after the other sister who had a cataract, and another one was just cute and chubby. So I named her after the third sister. I mean, they were not pleased with me, I have to say.
That's amazing.
Another litter was named after. I don't know if you ever watched Santa Barbara, this American soap that was very popular in India. Do you know this?
No.
Okay, well, I named them after the most popular characters from that, and then one was again three female kittens and 1 male. So, and I was, as I said earlier, really into Bollywood. So at that time, there was only one Bollywood actor who had acted with the 3 most popular actresses of that period in the mid-90s. And so he was Rishi Kapoor, so he died recently. Rishi Kapoor, and then there was Juhi Chawla, or Juju as I called her, and she was my baby because she was born like into my hands, and we had this incredible relationship. Like we never gave her away; she was mine. And there was Sridevi and Madhuri Dixit. So these were all the names. But Juju was incredible. Like she wouldn't do anything without me. And then when I got married and moved out of home, whenever I phoned, she would come to the phone and kneel down the phone and speak to me. She was just lovely. Yeah.
Those cats are really like my cat was I called her the heart of my heart. She was the first cat I ever had, and because me and my husband are both allergic to cats, and obviously decided that not having cats was worse than having a constant allergic reaction.
Yes.
So so I'd never had cats before, and then I was asleep I was living in a basement flat, and there was a rainstorm, and I heard this weird noise, and there was this cat just sitting just inside the open window, and I put her outside because allergic, and she just meowed for 4 hours without stopping until I let her back in again. And that was it. She lived with us, and she was absolutely like feral. She had barely any fur. She was skin and bones. She had these big sores on her. She wouldn't let us anywhere near her. So we managed to kind of throw multiple towels over her and get her to a vet to get kind of treated for all the stuff. And then she sulked outside with her back to the flat for a full day. But it took about 6 months for her to learn to trust us. But it was just because of that, like because of the work I had to do to get her. Like I called cat protection and said, "There's this cat that appears to have decided she lives with us. You need to come pick her up." And they said, "Okay, we'll be there in a couple of days." And a couple of days later, they came and were like, "Yeah, we no one's called about this cat, so we're here to pick her up." And I was like, "Nope, no."
Not happening.
She's mine now.
I just wanted to say, during the middle of that, we got a £10 donation. So thank you.
Oh wow.
I was like,
yeah,
punched the mic, and I'm so sorry.
But she was just we saved each other. It was when I was first really sick, and it was so kind of again focusing on this other kind of being that needed help and needed saved, and we just she was I still miss her. It's just been gone for 11 years and I miss her a lot, but she was my girl.
Another £5.
Did you become immune to her, Fiona?
I did, and it's the same with the other two. Like they're not supposed to sleep on the pillows. That's about the extent of it. But yeah, I kind of have built up I take an antihistamine every day, but these two are fine now, and with Indra was fine as well.
I did the same thing when I lived with my previous flatmate, who has the same name as my current flatmate, which is really confusing when I go through my legal documents. But he had a cat, and like antihistamine every day.
Yep.
Kat, what about you? Do you have any pets at all?
No, I have children. So I grew up on a farm, so probably similar to Brittle's story, there was always feral cats or half feral cats around that, I named one Tame because my mother said that cat is tame, meaning that like you can pet that cat without getting scratched up. So I named it Tame, and that like we only had one cat that would let me pet it. So I don't know, like I don't mind. I like other people's cats. I like them. I just don't want one for my own, I guess. I never wanted a cat on my own. And then I just don't have the kind of lifestyle I guess we rent our flat and stuff, so just really can't have a pet right now. I am on a visa.
Yeah, I understand that. I totally get that, Kat. I remember the day I got my indefinite leave to remain. Actually, it was my birthday, and when the biometric residence permit came, and I was on my way to work, and my husband phoned me to say that it had arrived, and I had not realized that I had not really breathed properly for the 6 odd years that it took for it to come. I could actually feel my body relax. Like, right, this, now I feel safe here. Now, I'm not one paperwork error away or some sort of, I don't know, other horrible thing away from from having to give up my life and go back to I don't know what. But yes, it's interesting how everything is defined by a visa.
It is, yeah. I completely identify with that. Yeah. Just even hearing you talk about it, if I get indefinite leave to remain, like I could just feel myself relaxing thinking about the concept.
Is that a possibility? Is that something that would happen for you?
Not in the foreseeable future, I guess. Not like we're on our way to renew our visas, and we won't be eligible yet because on student visas you need the 10 years time in country. So we live here 4.5 now, but
okay.
Well,
I mean, if hopefully we'll be independent by then, but if your children have lived here for 7 years, there's a way of getting indefinite leave to remain without waiting for 10 years.
And I think that my kids are eligible when at the 6-year mark because, like, my daughter turned 2 here, and my son was 4. So I think they're young enough where they'll have lived half their life.
Yeah, and so what that means is like the whole family gets indefinite leave to remain. It's not just them. So I think there's a court ruling because I've used it when I worked at Shakti and Said. We've been able to use it a couple of times for some families. There was women actually where there were no other options because of how immigration status turned out when they left the abuser, and that was one way of remaining. I mean, it's just awful.
I did know about that different time limit, but I've been just kind of in the back of my head. We're getting close to that time frame. Hopefully we'll make it.
I hope so too.
Very much hoping there will be some kind of an amnesty for the first year, where the people who were forced to leave by the Westminster government will be allowed to come back to Scotland. Because my 2 best friends were made to leave a couple of years ago, and this is home. This is their home, and it sucks that they are not here.
Yeah, my husband, my partner is he's a member of the Greens as well, and he finished his master's, and there are no jobs with visas right now. He's got a master's in environmental politics, and there's just nothing.
And this is the thing, like my friend has got their PhD in like Scottish history. It's in gender, the history of gender in Scotland, and like it's our history, and they were still there was nothing that they could do. There were no jobs. There was nothing that they would and like they've got huge amount of experience with working with like crisis lines and in sexual violence and stuff, again because of the nature of the research that they were doing, but again like that kind of work tends not to come with visas.
No.
And the Home Office doesn't care about Scottish history.
No.
I think the Home Office doesn't care about people. That's
very, very true. Yes.
So, yeah.
Kat.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if you could tell us a bit more about what you do, and then I might have a question relating to LGBT stuff for you after that.
Well, so I am. Well, first of all, I'm retired. I'm medically retired from the military. I was in the Navy in the U.S. So I'm kind of a pensioner, and I'm also I'm on like my second career, my third career now. I'm in grad school for international European politics, and I actually first came to Scotland to study psychology, but after I got my master's in psychology, I decided to study politics. I don't know, because I wanted to do something I wanted to apply the research I was doing, which was increasing women in STEM fields, which I did a lot of research on that kind of stuff from a psychology standpoint. But as of now, as of 2020 and 2021, my kids are home learning. One of them's back in class, and one of them's still home learning. And I'm on hold with school, and I'm just being a mom right now. And I'm also I'm the women's officer for Edinburgh Central, that infamous SMP branch. So I'm sometimes the punching bag for people who are upset about certain things.
I think that
but-
these certain things might be what I'm kind of about to ask you on.
Oh, probably. So bring
Good
it up.
people representation for Edinburgh, though. It's really good.
Also, I just want to say thank you to Mick Castle for your £50 donation that brought us up to 4,200.
Thank you.
Which we have already gone by, and we're at 4,250 now.
Which is just incredible. Like, seriously,
absolutely.
everyone.
So great.
We're not even halfway through the stream. Yeah, so, Kat, I'm going to ask about trans people now. As a fair warning. Obviously, within some recent political and Twitter and just media and discussion spheres, what is commonly and rather, in my opinion, sickly referred to as the trans issue, is often framed as being opposed to the struggles and problems that women face in society. Your thoughts, I suppose, on this?
It's kind of one of those weird things where, because I grew up with a very conservative family, like socially conservative, not boring conservative because we're broke. So it wasn't just trans people that were othered, it was anybody that was LGBT, it was anybody who wasn't white, it was anybody, a woman with a career, or a woman that didn't have children. These are all people that were othered and whispered about. And I remember vividly being in, going to my differential psychology, like pub nights, that we'd go to, and hearing from someone about how there's this branch of feminism that doesn't think trans women are women because they don't get pregnant. And I just thought, that can't be a real thing. Like, there's no way that there's feminists that don't think trans women are women. Like, I just couldn't believe it. So, I guess in the fight for reproductive rights and being able to breastfeed where you want to in the US, like, I was always in the same fight, standing arm in arm with trans women and, people working for LGBT rights and racial justice. Like, we're all standing together. So I just think it's like I said before, it's whoever wants to divide, they're going to pick off sections. They're going to decide, okay, this group of people, the time is right. We can peel them off and separate them and get people fighting. And, all over in Poland, they just outlawed abortion. There's so many things where they're rolling back women's rights. I think it was in Hungary where, like, domestic violence, maybe it's Poland again, where domestic violence is being decriminalized. And this stuff all started as, separate the T from the LGB, and then now we see stuff that's more biphobic coming out. Like, all that stuff it comes from the same place, and that place is not respecting every human life as, being worth dignity.
Can I jump in on just a point that Kat made
Yes,
there?
I'll pause my rant.
No, it's okay. It was there's. I think that this is unfortunately why I tend to separate people into the manipulators and the manipulated and all this, because the problem is that women's rights are precarious and they are always under threat. and they are always at risk of being rolled back. And there's this, and women are always at risk of sexual assault and all this kind of, the threats that are really real around us. And I think that there's sometimes a tendency in the movement to kind of minimize them, because what we're trying to say is that that's not where the threat is coming from, and not enough of us saying, no, these threats are absolutely very real and we should all be fighting together on this. Because I mean, my history is somewhat different from yours, Kat, obviously, but my history in feminism is very similar. It's that I learned about feminism from intersectional groups of people, from Indigenous activists and from feminists of color, and this kind of separation is something that they were really alert to, in a way that I think white feminists tend not to be. And there is this real problem, is that there's so many people who are aware, so many women specifically, who are aware of the threats to our rights, and that makes it very easy to manipulate them. If you have these like really emotive disinformation campaigns coming out saying that that your rights are under threat, and this is where the threat is coming from, when that's not at all where the threat is coming from.
I would definitely agree. And something I'd add to that is, I think one of the biggest dangers is to have this big boogeyman stranger danger. We have to protect women in toilets, so that it's ignoring the real threat. Is what's the most common type of rape? It's acquaintance rape. It's not somebody that's unknown.
Yeah.
So I think a false sense of security is one of the most dangerous things you can tell your kids. You don't want to tell your kids, oh, it'll just be fine, don't be careful. Like, that's silly to me.
Like, the bathroom discussion, it's come up a few times during the 11 hours that we've gone so far. It's such a frustratingly, I don't want to say non-issue argument, but like it's such an argument that like there are more important things in relations to trans people that we should be talking about, I believe.
It's insulting. That whole debate is just insulting to everybody, I think.
Like I remember I saw something, I believe it was retweeted by Laura K. Dale on Twitter. They retweeted, or she retweeted a thread that was talking about how these things, the things that are designed to keep what the policies deem as men out of women's spaces often don't actually account for cis men. Like in women's prisons, they have cis male guards. Women's toilets are cleaned by male cleaners.
Sorry, that's my. I have a whole really very emotive rant about this particular thing, because the same women who, someone once tagged HM prisons into a conversation where I was saying that we know where the real threat is in prisons. We know where it exists, and the threat to female prisoners is, and always has been, male guards. It is. We absolutely know that that's true. This is stuff that we don't have a great deal of robust research on it, because prisons won't allow that research to be done. We are about 10 years behind the US in this, about research into the rates of sexual violence within prisons. They called the Howard Foundation. I can't remember the name of them, but there's an organization that looks at prisoner safety, and they've been trying to get a proper audit of sexual violence in prisons done, both from other inmates and from guards, and prisons block it from happening. And And the thing with the Karen White story, which everyone brings up as the kind of big spook story, is that there are two sets of protocols that should have been followed, that should have stopped that from happening. It's just that we don't give a shit about the safety of prisoners. We don't care as a culture. We, like, everything that we do is based in this idea that once you commit a crime, then you sacrifice your human rights. And so the safety of, like, the protocols which were supposed to stop that from happening, because there's a whole bunch of men who rape men who are also not put into positions where they can access potential victims. There are protocols which are supposed to be followed and they weren't followed because we don't care. And when I tried to say that to the people who were using Karen White as a reason to say that we shouldn't take care of trans prisoners, then they tagged HM Prisons into the thread to tell on me because look at what she's saying about your brave people, and it melted my brain, because this is, like, we know where the threat is, we absolutely know it, and they've never given a shit and have never raised their voices about male guards. They have never cared about it because it is not about the safety of women. It has never been about the safety of women. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that is the point I was going to get to, and you put it brilliantly. Yeah.
Sorry, I do that.
No, that's quite all right. Yeah.
I don't want to be judged. I don't even want to be held up and judged compared to the other Americans that I know in indie Scottish Twitterland. So it's not like using anecdotes or like case studies is just not going to cut it. And honestly, I also was I was a sexual assault victim advocate in the Navy. I was an equal opportunity officer, for lack of a better term. And the problems that are the problem, they're concentrating the wrong thing, because there are problems that need to be dealt with, but yeah, they're missing the point, I suppose. They need more research, and maybe they'll see how much sexual assault underreported. Maybe we need to talk about that more. I don't know.
It's
See,
also
this is... Sorry.
Sorry. This idea that, self-ID for trans people, which, to my understanding, is fundamentally about, most of the time, marriage, birth, and death certificates above anything else, that it's going to, open the floodgates for sexual assault in some ways. Where
ridiculous.
Personally, I feel like it would be much easier to, say, steal a cleaning uniform than it would be to go through the arduous process of self-ID.
I mean, literally, this is the thing, right? And this is the argument that I always make about this, is that men have zero problems in accessing victims. None at all. The overwhelming majority of perpetrators, of rapists, of sexual assaulters, like 99% of them will never see a second of justice. That is, they have no need to go through any kind of statutory processes. They have no need to even do anything particularly weird in order to access victims. They don't face justice, and this is the stuff that we've seen over the last few years. The Me Too was a global movement for sexual assault justice. It was this massive outpouring of experiences and trauma, and people trying desperately to hold people in power to account. And one man went to jail. Out of all of that, one. There are a few more faced some charges, and a small group of people faced social consequences like losing a job and some divorces. But one man went to jail. An entire global movement. It just...
Yeah. Okay. Can I come in here? Can I come in?
Sorry.
So as somebody who actually manages, which is what is a largely women-only space, because we also work with male survivors of sexual violence in my work, and non-binary people as well. Men already have access to these spaces, and I'll tell you how. Strategically, the people who are signing off the funding that comes to our organizations, that allow us to establish and run these spaces, or who don't actually sign off enough funding. If you know, these are politicians, council officers, largely men. So to me, the everyday existence of my rape crisis center is, you know, we are run by women, operated by women. But we just have to look at what happened a few days ago to Monkland Women's Aid. You know, the women's spaces were under threat by actually taking their funding away by the local authority. And then you have to look at who is, you know, it is councillors who finally sign off on budgetary decisions, but how many women were there around that table making that decision? So the real threat to women on these spaces is obviously not from trans people, but it is from men, and often it is done by people who make decisions about what money we can and cannot get. We are grossly underfunded. We have to campaign, you know, bring out long waiting lists and say this is how many days a woman is waiting. There are parts of Scotland where a woman has to wait for a year to get support in a rape crisis centre. And those decisions about how much money we get and who gives it to us and where we can get it from are largely made by men. So I agree that women's spaces are under threat, but from men who make powerful decisions. And you know, like that's what we should also be talking about here. You know, men can harm women wherever they like, as you know, you don't have to get a certificate to do that. And I mean, even if there was, like, I cannot say that it's never going to happen. It might. I can't imagine how and when it's possible. But what those who argue against self-ID or the reform of the Gender Recognition Act, because also the reality is that I self-ID'd as a trans person much before anyone else cared. You know, I have to declare it so that it satisfies the moralities of cis people. But I lost track of what I was going to say now. I'm going to shut up. I was going to say something important, but now my mind has floated away.
If
it
comes back,
leaving it as the delicate, you know, sensibilities of cis people is probably, that is a really great statement. You know, the group of people who are known for their morality, cis people.
Yep. Sky, do we have another speaker? I know that Rob was supposed to be on.
Rob has been unable to join us because of a family emergency, I think.
Oh, okay. No problem at all. Just checking. I see Rob in the chat.
But I do believe they're in the chat. So if Rob is available, feel free to shoot our mods a message.
Time to bow out now because I have been monopolizing your time for a couple of hours.
I need to go as well. Probably one of my children is not asleep, I think.
Oh, yeah. I sure wouldn't mind awake too.
That's no problem
It's
at all.
been amazing talking to you both. Do you have any social media or anything you want to push or plug to the chat?
Yes. So I usually use Twitter, less these days because every time I go on there, someone calls me a rapist or some awful thing. But it's my full name, so @Mridul_Wadwa. And if you are in Fort Valley, look out for Fort Valley Rape Crisis Center. And if you have other money to give away apart from the Equality Network, think about us at Fort Valley Rape Crisis Center. So thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for joining us, Mridul.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was so nice to talk to you.
Bye. Same here. Bye, Kat. Bye, Fiona.
Bye.
For me, I have Fiona SMP is my Twitter. That's where I spend most of my life. It's where the kind of global disability community organizes on Twitter as well. So there's, I mean, not on my one specifically, obviously, but on Twitter in general. So you'll be able to pick up a bunch of stuff of interesting information to do that. I'm also always feel free to message me with questions about disability or anything really. I'm around and have a couple of decades of experience and want to share that with people where I can. So yes, I am going to go and pass out now. And good luck with the rest of your evening. I shall join back again tomorrow.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Fiona.
Thank you, Fiona. I just wanted to say, one of my partners has been talking on Twitter. They live in New Zealand, but how much hearing about you, hearing from you and the stuff that you've said has meant to them as a disabled person.
That's so lovely. Thank you. And I mean, this is why I do. Like, I genuinely, my life was saved by people, and I want to be able to give this information to as many people as I possibly can, because these are, these experiences are huge and life-changing, and but the disability community is so vibrant and amazing, and everyone should come join us. If you're disabled, then it doesn't matter. This is my final takeaway for this, is that there's this ridiculous ableist idea that there's a hierarchy of disability and that you have to be severely affected in order to be able to call yourself disabled, and it's not true. If you have a condition which affects your ability to carry out your day-to-day life, or that you are discriminated against because of, or anything like that, then you belong with us. Come and talk to us. There's a ton of support and information on condition management and doctor wrangling and all that kind of stuff available, and we are largely very welcoming and want to share that. So come join us.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Fiona.
Have a good
Have
night.
a good evening. Cool.
We are £10 away from 4,300 and 5 minutes away from midnight. Never mind, we have hit 4,300 as I was saying that sentence.
I always love when you start saying stuff like that.
We are 700 away from 5,000.
yeah. We're working on it. We're working on it.
We are.
So I suppose, Kat, Kat's still here, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Good. I'm just saying thanks for coming on. I'm sorry, my mind is like frazzled as hell right now. I've just finished the hardest I've just finished the hardest platforming section in the game, so my hands are all minging and sweaty.
Oh no.
I think post-COVID, if we ever do this again, we should do it from the same spot and we can actually switch out playing the game halfway through.
We've completed the Path of Pain already. 8064R7. We're absolutely gunning it. I have no idea. We've still got a couple of things to get in game, and sorry, I feel like I'm overriding the speaker at the moment. Sorry, Kat. There's a couple of things I'm still to do, but
Talisman donated £100.
Jesus. Thanks so much, Talesian.
Talesian,
awesome.
I misread it. I'm dyslexic and it's 12 o'clock at night.
We'll give you a
And
pass then.
I've been looking at Hollow Knight and talking to such amazing people, and my brain's a bit frazzled.
That's no worries. Am I okay to quickly jump off and, like, I suppose I better ask the audience's permission. Can I take the Obi-Wan Kenobi costume off yet? Or
Nope.
Is it on for the rest of the stream? Because I was thinking of changing...
It's on for the rest of the stream.
Okay, that's fine. It just makes it hard to pee, that's all.
That sounds like a you problem.
Okay, that's fair. Right, well, I'll show you. I can't do a percentage check because I think you only get the percentage right near the end. We could quite literally go and complete the game right now, but we wouldn't get the 112% that we're aiming for.
We are 11 hours and 36 minutes into the game. Which, I guess we've had to pause it here and there, which is why the timer is 20 minutes ahead.
Yeah, we're fine. Cool, I'm going to jump off and go to the loo and stuff. I'll be back shortly.
Alright. Kat and I will hold the fort.
All right.
All right.
We had a
So,
party going on. Now it's just you and me.
yep. So there's you are retired from the American Navy. Am I correct in saying?
Yes. Even I was
Um,
never on a ship. I flew in airplanes, so
Oh, I love planes.
as
My
confusing as that
father was in the British Navy. He repaired helicopters. My uncle is also in the British Navy.
Okay.
I suppose that kind of opens you up to just the question on the former President Trump's ban on transgender people in the military, I suppose, and just kind of your thoughts on that.
I mean, I was with everybody else saying, like, even if he bans it, it's just it's gonna pause it. Look what happened. It was just kind of like, what is it, like a fart in a tornado or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
it just was like, it did nothing. And it was like, it didn't do it did terrible things to the people who were in the service and who were, who needed medication, whose lives were in limbo. Like, he threw a lot of people's lives into chaos. He did it wherever he could, and it was a terrible thing. I was in the Navy when they repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And I cannot believe they ever did. I mean, I wish that I was still in the Navy when they did all this stuff for the transgender, like, funding and stuff like that, because of the conniption fits that people had when they heard about Don't Ask, Don't Tell being repealed, which did nothing virtually.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. So what do I think about it? I think it was dumb. I think it was not, it messed with human rights. It didn't treat people with dignity, and I'm glad that Biden's all on board, because they're trying to repeal trans rights in states right now in the U.S.
I isn't here, which is a weird time for him to leave, but we've just hit exactly the halfway point. We are halfway there. Oh my god. We're only halfway there.
Halftime.
Yeah. Sorry to cut you off there at the end.
Oh, no, you're good.
Yeah, it was such a weird thing to discuss in some ways, because I had a friend who was in America, and they don't have any intention of joining the military, but they're like, I should have the right to choose to die for my country if I want to.
Oh, yeah,
it's a weird way to put it, but yes, you should.
I think the only legitimate thing that the military could have said was that we don't have the facilities or the medical, whatever, to be able to support what you need. You know what I mean? And since that's what was in place and is in place again now, it took that excuse away. So, like, they were really smart in the way they implemented it, because they did it with the paperwork. Oh no, it's fine. Go ahead.
It was also kind of one of those things where if any facility I feel goes, well, we just don't have the resources to do it, it's like, get them. Like,
yeah,
equality.
Like, if the military
it's part of equality, The U.S. military is one of the largest funded groups, I think, in the world.
Yeah.
Get them.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it always seems like when they do budget cuts, it was like we'd run out of paper in September, like at the end of September, and we'd still have these big clunking airplanes filled with fuel. But no, like it's exactly right. Like, if they write it in, and the thing is that they have to train doctors in the military, right? So I'm sure that the way that a lot of things with equality work is that it's like, how do people gain voting rights? They need a new pool of voters, and whoever needs them gives the new people voting rights. So since they had a need to have doctors train and to be able to do surgery or treat different injuries and different things, they thought, oh hey, what if we write in the regulations that trans people can serve and do that, and then we have this program where you can train the doctors in house. You know,
We've just had another £100 donation from I couldn't get the 8064 R7 which has put us up to 4,500. What are we gonna do at 5,000? Right. I feel like I need to do something as well because I've just sat here to some extent and spoken to people.
I don't know. I to be honest, that strip.
No, I can strip because you will never see me.
But I've said apparently 4,500 is when I get to take the costume off, which is amazing because I've got a Bionicle t-shirt on, which is.
I'll go put the Bonkle shirt on.
The Bonkle shirt's already on. It's like under. I'm like the world's worst Superman at the moment. I'm like, you know, the Bonkle. I've got another t-shirt that I can change into as well. I was planned for a clothes change, as if I wasn't gonna be here like nervously sweating my entire way through the game.
We're also ready for Rob to come on as well.
Oh, fantastic! Oh god.
So that's another £100 donated.
Wait, what?
wow.
By
8064 R7, we have reached 4,500. That is
4,600.
Totally taking credit for all these. I'm just kidding.
Wait,
that is
what? 8064 R7 says I can only donate in £100 instances, so you're going to hear this a few more times.
Oh wow.
Whoa!
You can. I think you can actually. I know there's the kind of default ones, but you can write it in if you'd prefer to do it in one. But again, thank you so much in advance. That's awesome. And we're gonna have to think really quickly. What is the 5,000?
What is the 5,000?
What's the 5,000
What
stretch
can I
goal?
do?
Do you have like embarrassing childhood pictures?
I like the idea of a reading.
I am desperately looking to see if I have any of my old fan fiction from when I used to write fan fiction.
Yes, please.
Read it.
Yeah, now we're talking. Double points if it's like romantic fiction or erotic fiction.
Yeah.
Get the smut out.
There is no smut.
Hour 12.
I do have.
Exactly. This is the Twilight Zone of the stream.
I came on at just the right time.
Dramatically. So play Loch Lomond at 5,000. We would get DMCA'd and we wouldn't be able to put it on YouTube.
All right. I found a Dragon Age fan fiction I wrote in 2014. It's only 2 pages long, but it's a start.
806.
It's 2 different fan fictions, actually.
Thank you so much.
JPD MCP, that's my roommate saying, I hope I'm not in any of your fan fiction. I wrote your script for your final film.
Joy,
you love my fan fiction.
Crashburn meme, Joy will be joining us at 3 a.m.